Okay, so this evening we're working on ratio tables to double number lines. Grab your paper, pencil, and let's get started. I can create equivalent ratios using a ratio table and represent those ratios on a double number line diagram. I can extend and use a double number line diagram to solve ratio problems related to the real world. So let's start with a ratio table first. A way to compare ratios through the use of a table. Ratio tables should be reviewed for you because we have been doing these in the previous lessons. So let's look at the example. There are 4 apples on each plate. If there are 6 plates, how many apples are there altogether? So I can go up here and I can look at my ratio. For each plate, I have 4 apples. So I have a 4-to-1 ratio. Now I can start filling in my ratio table. If I started out with 4 apples to 1 plate, now let's see how many apples we would have on 2 plates. I can see I went from 1 to 2 by multiplying by 2. So 4 times 2 gets me 8. 8 apples to 2 plates. Let's look at 3 plates. I've seen that 1 times 3 gets me to 3, so 4 times 3 would get me to 12. 12 apples to 3 plates. Let's look at 4 plates. 1 times 4 gets me to 4, so 4 times 4 would get me to 16. To have 16 apples to 4 plates. And for 5 plates, 4 times 5 would give me 20. So I'd say I have 20 apples to 5 plates. And the one I'm wanting to know is for 6 plates, how many apples are there all together. So I took from 1 to get to 6, I multiplied by 6. So 4 times 6 would get me 24. Okay, a double number line diagram. A tool used for understanding the equivalence of 2 related numbers is called double because each mark on the line has 2 numbers matched to it. The top row of numbers describe the whole represented by the line in one way, and the bottom row describes the whole represented by the line in another way. Because the whole line is the same, it's possible to see the equivalence between the rows of numbers at any point on the line. So let's look at going from a ratio table to a double number line. Use an example we looked at before with our apples to plates. Now, just like in the ratio table, I can start out by representing on my double number line. Here's my apples to plates. So my top row of numbers is going to represent my apples, and my bottom row of numbers is going to represent my plates. My ratio was a 4-to-1. So for 4 apples, I had 1 plate. For 8 apples, I had 2 plates. For 12 apples, I had 3 plates. For 16 apples, I have 4 plates. For 20 apples, I have 5 plates. And for 24 apples, I had 6 plates. So, I represented my information and my ratios on a double number line, just like I did through a ratio table. Example 1. Saul is selling candy bars to raise money for the chess club. Saul sold 20 bars the first day and earned $40. How much money will he earn if he sells 160 bars? First, we're going to solve this problem using a ratio table. I can look at the problem and I can see my first ratio, 20 bars to $40. So I can fill in my ratio table with my first ratio of 20 candy bars to $40. Now I want to know how much he's going to make if he sells 160 bars. So one way of doing this, I want to see what I can multiply both these numbers by, or find a pattern that I could go throughout this table with to get to the 160 bars. So let's break 20 to 40 down into a simpler ratio to look at. So if I break it down, I can see that I can divide both numbers by 20. 20 divided by 20 is 1. And 40 divided by 20 is 2. So I see I have a 1-to-2 ratio, which means that for every candy bar I sell, I'm earning $2. I'm doubling my profit, or my amount. Like if I sell 1 candy bar, I'm getting $2. Well, if I sell 2 candy bars, I would get $4. So each time I sell a candy bar, or a total amount of candy bars, my profit is actually double that number. So I can actually multiply both numbers by 2. 20 times 2 gives me 40. 40 times 2 gives me 80. 40 times 2 gives me 80. 80 times 2 gives me 160. See how I'm doubling my profit by the amount of candy bars I sell? It's a double. And then 80 times 2 is 160. And 160 times 2 is 320. So if I sold 160 candy bars, I would have earned $320. So now let's use a double number line to represent the problem of finding how much he would earn for 160 bars. I do this just like I did in my ratio table. We already know we have a 1 to 2 ratio, which means that for every candy bar I sell, I'm getting $2. So if I'm actually starting out with 20 bars, if I had 20 candy bars and I got $40, and then if I look at for 40 candy bars, I got $80. 40 times 2 gives me my 80. So for 80 candy bars, I'm getting 160 because I've got that 1 to 2 ratio going on. And then if I look at for 160 candy bars, I'm actually going to be making $320. Still a 1 to 2 ratio. Okay, let's do example 2. An ice cream factory makes 140 quarts of ice cream in 5 hours. How many quarts could be made in 25 hours? Represent this problem using a ratio table and a double number line. Pause video until you have completed this problem. Alright, so let's work this problem out. If I have an ice cream factory that made 140 quarts of ice cream in 5 hours, how many quarts can be made in 25 hours? So I'm going to go ahead and set up, I know it's 140 to 5 hours. So I can fill in 140 quarts to 5 hours. That's my ratio. I'm going to go ahead and look at, I'm going to fill in my ratio, my table for my hours. So I'm going to go for 10 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours, and 25 hours. I can use equivalent ratios here because I see I went from 5 to 10 by multiplying 5 times 2 to get to 10. So let's do the same thing up here on the top. 140 times 2 gets me to 280. Now if I look at 5 times 3 got me to 15. So 140 times 3 gets me to 420. Now 5 times 4 got me to 20. So 140 times 4 gets me to, so it actually gets me to 560. And then 5 times 5 got me to 25. So 140 times 5 would get me to, should be 700. So in 25 hours, the factory should produce 700 quarts of ice cream. So to represent this on a double number line, I do the same thing. My first mark here, I'd have 140 to 5. And then I can do equivalent ratios. So for 10 hours, I would have 280 quarts. For 15 hours, I would have 420 quarts. And then for 20 hours, I would have 560 quarts. And then for 25 hours, I would have 700 quarts. I have ready for class tomorrow. The Bakers at Healthy Bakery can make 160 bagels in 5 hours. How many bagels can they bake in 20 hours? Represents this problem using a tape diagram and a double number line. Okay, let's look at example 3. An ice cream factory makes 140 quarts of ice cream in 5 hours. How many quarts can be made in 22 hours? I know this is similar to the one we just did, but it is just a little bit more complicated. So let's try this problem using a ratio table and a double number line. Pause video until you have tried it. let's work this out together. So like in the previous problem, we actually filled in, we see 140 quarts to 5 hours. So I'm just going to fill that in again, my ratio. And I'm going to go ahead and do my equivalent ratios and get them up here. Because this is actually what we did in the last one. We did equivalent ratios. I'm doing the same thing here. Sorry, it's 2560. So we know that in 25 hours we could do 700 quarts. However, we go back and look at this, we're wanting to know for 22 quarts. So I'm going to actually expand my table by adding me in some more columns. That way we can work with this. I'm going to add in actually 4. So we're going to break it down into individual units now for each hour. Let me build my table just a little bit bigger here. So I'm wanting to know for each hour now, so that I can get down to the 22 hours. So, in order to get down to how much they are making an hour, I can take my ratio up here of the 140 to 5, and I can divide and get it to a simplified ratio. And if that's the case, I'm going to divide 140 by 5 by 5 to get it will actually equal to 28. So for every hour, that gives me a ratio of 28 quarts to 1 hour. So using that information, I can now jump for 1 hour each time. Alright, so I can go up to 21 hours. I'm going to add 28 quarts to 560 to give me 588. Same thing, I'm just going to add another 28 quarts to get up to 22 hours, which gives me 616 quarts. To get to 23 hours, I can add another 28 quarts of ice cream to get to 644. To get up to 24 hours, I could add another 28 quarts, which would give me 672. So then I'm able to see that for 22 hours, we would be making 616 quarts of ice cream. Now the way I could do that on my double number line is just like I just did it with my ratio table. Alright, so now representing this on a double number line, I'm just going to actually fill in for my equivalent ratios. For 5 hours, I had 140 quarts. For 10 hours, I had 280 quarts. For 15 hours, I had 420 quarts. For 20 hours, I had 560. And for 25 hours, sorry, my bad, I had 700. So now to get it down to individuals, I could just divide just like I did up here. I could add I want to do for each one. And if I do this on the bottom, I'm doing the same thing to the top. And then I would break it down just like I did up here, which I would be adding 28 to every one to get my 22 hours. So for 22 hours, I would have 616 quarts of ice cream. So have ready for class tomorrow. The Baker's a Healthy Bakery can make 160 bagels in 4 hours. How many bagels can they bake in 21 hours? Represent this problem using a tape diagram and a double number line. I will see you tomorrow.